Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. So today I'm going to be talking to you guys about postpartum depression. I have experienced depression a few times in my life. I am one of those personalities that is more prone to depression than other people. So I've certainly had my bouts of it where it was pretty bad. I've never experienced anything like postpartum depression. Throughout my entire lupus diagnosis, I had been hanging on to little threads of hope. Whether I was seeing an all-natural doctor or somebody who was giving me prescription medication, I was always waiting for the next chapter. I was always waiting to get better. I definitely had my moments where I felt like I wasn't going to get better ever, but they were usually fleeting, and I was usually very focused on my goal of getting pain-free, getting better. When postpartum depression hit, it was a level of hopelessness and worthlessness like I have never felt before. Part of that had to do with my relationship. My husband at the time and I were not in a good place, and there were a lot of things during that time that felt pretty hopeless. I don't want to get into all the ins and outs of why we didn't work, because it's not just my story, but that did have a lot to do with it at the time. Part of it was I was flaring so bad that my hands were curled and it was really hard for me to pick up the baby. Leo was only 16 or 17 pounds at the time. He really wasn't that heavy to carry. However, I was finding myself not being able to do it. I dreaded any time he had to have a diaper change because it was so painful for me to get the diaper on and off, and to clean him thoroughly. I couldn't give him a bath by myself. I had to wait for Ryan to get home because he could help him in and out of the bath. My hands, again, were like this, so I couldn't open them. I couldn't do anything to help him, especially if he was wet and slippery. I couldn't. My knees were giving me trouble, so it was hard for me to get up and down and go anywhere. And when I say go anywhere, I mean go back and forth to the restroom or go back and forth to the kitchen. It wasn't go anywhere as in go to Target. One morning I woke up and I felt like my little boy would be better off without me. Ryan went to work that morning and I got online and contacted my nurses. I am still friends on Facebook with the nurses that I contacted at the time. I told them how I was feeling. I wrote a message through the IU portal, and my amazing nurse called me as soon as she got it, which was only like less than an hour later. The first thing she asked was how everything was going at home. I hadn't told anybody how things were really going at home, and it was not the time for me to tell her. I didn't feel like. So I told her everything was fine, it was just me that had a problem. She told me that she wanted eyes on me that day, so she recommended I go to a psychiatric center. I don't really know what you call it. It wasn't a psych ward, but it is like a mental health center that we had in Indianapolis. So I called Ryan and he was able to come home and work from home the rest of the day and watch the baby so that I could go and get checked out. The drive there, I kept feeling like I was going to swerve off the road, not because I wasn't safe driving, but because I wasn't safe in my head and I just didn't want to be there anymore. I met some very wonderful people there. They spoke to me for a long time. They did a few assessments. They agreed that I was suffering from postpartum depression, but they also said that it looked like I had PTSD from my previous experience in the psych ward and with my illness in general. They asked me if I wanted to be admitted. I said no, I wanted to go home to my baby. They recommended I contact my therapist and she and I could make a plan whether or not that was the safe thing to do. I did contact my therapist. She moved my once a month sessions to once a week for the next little bit to get me into a place where I wasn't experiencing the same feelings of hopelessness and worthlessness that brought me to the hospital in the first place. That day when I got home, I saw two beautiful does in my backyard. Ever since psychosis, I had been interested in spirit animals. I had actually gotten a tattoo of one, a fox. That is my spirit guide. But I didn't know all of them yet. I still don't know all of them, but I know a lot of them. But the doe had a very special meaning for me. Basically, does are wonderful mothers. They make a very rich, nutritious milk that they give to their little fawns. They are very attentive, but they also take really good care of themselves. After their babies are fed and safe, they will find a little place for the babies to lie down and take a nap. And then they will go off for hours and just graze and replenish themselves before coming back to finding their baby and being the perfect mother again. That held a very significant meaning for me because I did feel very depleted because I wasn't giving back to myself in any way. I kept pouring everything out onto my little baby and to my husband, and I wasn't pulling back for me. I wasn't replenishing myself. And with lupus, you know that you have to give back to yourself at some point. So I booked a trip to the beach. By the beach, I mean Lake Michigan, which was 3 hours away from me and very doable. I drove there over the weekend and I spent 2 nights away from my baby. On that trip, I did a lot of soul searching, I did a lot of journaling, and I decided to change a lot of my habits. I started going to bed super early, like 7:30 or 8, and getting up at 4 so that I had time to focus on myself for a while before my baby got up. I also planned to speak to my rheumatologist about going to physical therapy. There were a lot of things that I simply couldn't do with my body anymore, and I knew it was a lack of strength and not necessarily the lupus flares that were going on. I also decided to take charge of my relationship and not just accept whatever came down the pipeline. I wrote down a list of things that I wanted and things that were not acceptable to me, and I decided to go ahead and bring those to my current husband's attention and see if we could fix us. For anyone going through postpartum depression, I would highly encourage you to get away for a while. Honestly, any depression. It doesn't have to be postpartum. However, postpartum, it is very hard to get away. Even emotionally, you have that need to not leave your baby. However, the baby will not be fine if you are not fine. The baby will be fine if you leave it for 48 to 72 hours. But if you are not fine, that baby is not going to be fine. So please take care of yourself for a minute. Another thing that was really good for me was starting to get into meditation. I would highly recommend some kind of spirituality to get you through, whether that is your faith in a higher power or maybe exploring alternative means of spirituality. I highly recommend something to make you feel like you're not in this alone and everything is planned and you're okay to be exactly where you are in the journey. That is definitely something that got me through. I would also recommend writing down all the demands on you. That's something else that I did, and it was like different relationships that I was giving a lot of energy to that I really didn't need to be. Different expectations that I had for myself that were also unnecessary for that chapter of my life. So sitting down and getting to a place where you feel like you have everything out on paper and then you can really look at it head on, objectively, and tick off the things that you really don't need in your life, that aren't essential to you or aren't in line with your values. I was able to get through that little bout of depression without medication. However, part of that had to do with my PTSD, and literally any pill that was going to affect anything in my brain, I would have a panic attack even looking at. So that was the best thing for me in that moment in time. However, I'm a huge advocate for psychiatric medication. If that is something your doctors recommend, if that is something that you need, please, please know that you have all the permission and support in the world to take that for yourself. After getting home from that trip and having definite goals, spiritually, relationally, and physically, I felt a lot better. I felt like I had direction. I felt very supported by my therapist. I felt like I was giving my baby the absolute best that I had to offer, and that was enough. That is where I'm going to leave you guys today. Please reach out to me if you have any questions or to tell your story of postpartum depression. I know there are so many out there. I feel like it is more common than we know because a lot of people, they're either ashamed about it or they don't want to bring other people down. And I know there is a time and place to share that story. However, I am creating space for that. And if you ever want to reach out to me with your story of depression, postpartum or not, please let me know. I'm always here for you. Well, I hope you guys have the best day ever, and I'll see you on the flip side. Whether I was seeing an all-natural doctor or somebody who was giving me prescription medication, You know who you are. I feel like it is more common than we let on.